Good morning, Facebook. It is Friday, but it's Friday morning this time, so I'm armed with my my oatmeal and my coffee instead of, I think last week I was talking about having a glass of wine. I think at 8:40, it's not quite time for that. It has been a really packed week, so I'm going to try not to talk fast, but there's a lot of ground I want to cover. First of all, I want to thank everybody who came to office hours in Norfolk last Saturday. We had a great crowd, a really broad range of issues that people were interested in. I think most of the people came with a particular issue they wanted to talk about, but almost all of them also stayed to listen to other people and to hear and we all learned a lot. And I had a couple of people reach out to me afterwards and say that was really fun. Learn things that they didn't know. Lots of experts come to the room and bring their experiences, and we all get to listen to one another. And I think that's a really healthy thing. So I really enjoy them. Monday of this past week was the first day that I have experienced the something I knew was coming, which is to say that all three of my committees met at the exact same time, which is not only physically challenging. You learn to get to to bounce back and forth between the committees, but what's hard is to really be present for the discussion when you're continually moving back and forth and you miss some of the earlier testimony. And you have to catch up with your colleagues. So that's a challenge I knew I was getting into, and I asked for 3 committees that met on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But it was indeed a challenge on Monday, in part because not only were there, they all met at the same time, they were all important meetings and covering important issues that I really would have preferred to follow the entire conversation. But I will lean on my colleagues to catch me up and did that. So in environment, first of all, we kicked off Monday's hearing with students from the Kellogg School. 8th grade came into Hartford to testify, and they were terrific. They were the first people to testify in that hearing, which focused largely on issues concerning recycling and proposals to ban the single-use plastic bag, which is what the students were there on, but also styrofoam trays, straws, other issues, also more issues involving municipal recycling. So there was a theme to the day concerning that. But those kids started off and they were articulate, clear, good, strong eye contact, persuasive, brought visual aids. They all brought their bags made out of feed sacks. So they were not only pointing to a problem, but to a solution. And so people were really impressed. So Falls Village, you've made an impact around here. So come back. I also had that day the first working group subcommittee meeting in appropriations. So excuse me if I've been saying this before, but the process in appropriations has now moved to the part where all the various subcommittees in particular subject areas now have working group meetings, which are more focused meetings with government commissioners to really ask detailed questions and get information back for them so that we can go line by line and make proposals and decisions about line items in the budget. So it gets quite detailed. And I had the first one on Monday, which was on the Conservation and Development Subcommittee, and we heard from the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Housing. So that was, and it's a layered, that's our first step to ask questions, and they come back with the answers, and then we ask more questions based on the answers they give us, and then eventually we'll get to making proposals. So that my third committee is the Judiciary Committee, and that was a hearing that focused on several gun bills. And this one was, hard. There are sort of sides that are dug in on this, and the room can be quite tense because, people sit with the group that they're affiliated with, and sometimes the room erupts in, either derisive groans or gasps of shock. And, the committee leadership does a good job to try to tamp that down. And because the point of it is for us, all of us, but particularly the members of the committee, to listen to the people who have come in to testify, some of whom have to wait all day. This hearing went until well after midnight. To testify, to tell their story, to bring their perspective, and they're all important. And it's a good exercise in trying to listen to one another, but it's challenging in that group setting. And I wanted to sort of go back to, I during the campaign talked a lot about gun safety because it's very important to me, and I am a strong supporter of Connecticut's laws because they have, among other things, because they have resulted. We have among the strictest gun safety laws in the country, and as a direct result, we have among the lowest rates of gun death, and that's important, and so I'm a supporter. Since the campaign, I've had an opportunity to talk to a number of gun owners and people who, run gun shops and are hunters and sportsmen and things like that. And those have been really good conversations. Among other things, I get a chance to tell them that I grew up in rural Ohio. My father had guns. He kept them locked in a safe in his office. One of my favorite things to do with my dad when I was a little girl was to target shoot with him. And that was an important bonding experience for me. So this is not a foreign territory to me, and I understand. I had a lot of uncles who hunted, and it was something that was around me growing up. I also, as a prosecutor, became closely, got close-up knowledge of the devastation and destruction of gun violence, the prevalence of guns in our community, in our country, and in particular, the challenges in dealing with a live shooter situation when there are multiple firearms present on the scene. And that is something I had a lot of agents explain to me, the extreme difficulty, even for a highly trained agent, to manage that situation. So I have some direct familiarity with the various issues here, and so it's important to me. So we listened to a number, the gun bills that we discussed. There were a series of, there were about 7, I think. And so one is on safe storage, or 2 actually are on safe storage. We currently have a law in Connecticut that requires that loaded weapons be stored securely in a gun safe in a home in which minors, children under 16 or under, or a particularly vulnerable person is present. That's the current law in Connecticut. The proposal now is to extend that to unloaded weapons, and that particularly grows out of the tragic death of a young man named Ethan Song, who died from a gunshot from a weapon that was stored unloaded in a cardboard box, but right next to the ammunition. And he and a friend got it out, loaded it, and he was shot accidentally and killed. And so this law proposes that people requires that those who have minors or vulnerable people living in their home also store unloaded weapons in secure conditions. There's also a bill proposed to extend those safe storage requirements to unattended vehicles. So those were 2 of the laws we looked at. We also, one of the other proposals we looked at was to allow, currently you're not allowed to carry firearms in parks. And there is a proposal to allow that. And so we had a lot of testimony from a number of people about their wish to carry firearms in parks. And out of a fear of wildlife or and there are a number of reasons why people felt like they need, in order to be safe in a public park, they wanted to have their firearm with them. And I just wanted to share my personal perspective on that. We are a family of hikers, and we spend time in the woods. And I particularly have one of my daughters spends a lot of time hiking, and including solo hiking, and she does not carry a firearm in the woods. She has a bear whistle and a knife, but that's for camping purposes, not for self-defense purposes. She is highly trained and competent. She's a wildlife first responder, and I of course get concerned about her in the woods by herself, as any mother would. But her competence and confidence makes me realize that she knows what she's doing and she can handle the situation. Personally, if I thought that there were a lot of armed people in the woods hiking with her, that would be a cause of great alarm to me and concern for her safety, because situations escalate very quickly when a weapon or a firearm is involved. And so that's one I had a personal reaction to. We also looked at a proposal to allow law enforcement to, when they observe somebody carrying a firearm, to ask them for their permit. This came up last year, and it raised some concerns among the communities of color about the potential for disparate enforcement of this, and have law enforcement overwhelmingly ask people of color to produce permission papers or their permits, and not other people. And that's still an issue that we have to address, but there is a safety issue here, so I think it's another valuable conversation that it's good for us to listen to more information on. So that was a long and interesting hearing. Tuesday, I was in the district. Yay! I didn't have to drive to Hartford that day. And I got to participate, among other things, in 2 other projects with 8th graders, one at Sharon Central School and one at Cornwall Consolidated. And those were both documentaries that are being supervised and organized by the Civic Life Project, which is founded by Catherine Tadja, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Catherine, and Dominique Lasser, who are award-winning documentary filmmakers who work with students to help them explore civics and community engagement through making documentary film. And so I did the one in Sharon concerning the Second Amendment, and the one in Cornwall were questions on healthcare. And I tell you, they were great questions, both during the filming of the documentary and afterwards. I had great conversations with the teachers and the kids, and their activism is so important, and they're so thoughtful and engaged and fearless about asking hard questions, and it's really good to see us training a whole group of activists of all political persuasions. So that was super fun. And between those 2 documentaries, I went to the Canaan Valley Agricultural Co-op meeting at Freund's Farm in East Canaan. And that is always a great group of people to be with. Much of that discussion focused on a particular challenge faced by dairy farmers, which is how to deal with the manure and the phosphorus in particular that is produced on the farm, and how there's a high level of phosphorus in other, some lands in Connecticut, and so you have to be careful about how you do it, how you deal with it, how you manage that situation. And so we had a big discussion about the potential use of anaerobic digesters and whether we could form a collective way for one of the real powers of this group is it is a collective, and they have a long history of collaborating with one another, supporting one another, sharing information, being innovative. And that's unusual in all kinds of walks of life, but here in particular, they're used to it and they're really good at it. So I'm really hopeful that we can put together a proposal to create this kind of digester that can help address their issues, but also address issues of food waste in general, not just from farms, but from all of us, and how we deal with that waste in a responsible way. So that was very positive and fun. On Wednesday, we were in session. That was mostly to do judicial nominations. That, when I say we're in session, just to remind you, that means that we are actually sitting in our formal chamber, which we're not doing too much yet these days, but we'll be doing more as bills move their way forward. So this was, again, mostly judicial nominations, and I got to nominate Judge Deepantima from South Kent, who has she's the chief judge of the appellate court and has served with distinction since 1993. So it was a pleasure to nominate somebody from my district with such an incredible record. Also on Wednesday, we had a number of days or events to honor, and Alzheimer's Awareness Day, Girl Scout Day, Canine Veterans Day, also Canaan Veterans Day. But so I got to play with dogs, which was fun, and I got inspected by my own dog when I got home. I got a box of Girl Scout cookies, which is also super fun. Recommend that. And I got to, for me, also talking to the Alzheimer's awareness people is it gives me an opportunity to thank the people who do that work, because as many as you know, my mother had very severe dementia at the end of her life, and I was still deep in debt to the people who cared for her with knowledge, dignity, compassion. It's hard work, and those of us who have family members suffering with that need help. And so the people who do that work to help us care for our loved ones and also care for us when we're dealing with that is a really important thing. So it's a nice opportunity for me to thank a lot of people who do that work. On Thursday, I started the day with a meeting of the Northwest Connecticut Chamber Government Relations Committee, which focuses on business issues. which is a really important thing. And sometimes we, want to make sure that we're constantly looking at the interests of small business. And I do hope I talk about that a lot. I think about it a lot. And I think last week I highlighted a healthcare bill, which I hope can help small businesses with their healthcare costs. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of other bills that were voted out of committee this week that are helpful to businesses. They were in the Commerce Committee. One is supporting the manufacturing workforce pipeline. That's SB 854. One is extending the angel investor tax credit, which is HB 5005. One is improving pro-business marketing of Connecticut, which is HB 7008. And a one-stop shop online business portal proposal, which I'm looking forward to looking into, which is HB 7308. So I encourage you to check into those bills and see what you think. Let me know. Also another Thursday, more subcommittee working groups in appropriations. That one was in the Judicial Department, where we heard in particular about security concerns in the courts and how they're addressing those, and the transfer of the juvenile justice to the Judicial Department from the Department of Children and Families, DCF. And I expect to talk more about that in the future, but that was a big transfer of responsibility, and the thought was that judicial was better suited to handle it, but it's complicated, and there are a lot of social services involved, and so there are a lot of budgetary issues we have to look at, and I hope to be talking about that more. So a couple of last logistical things. One, I think I am next week going to start doing these videos on Thursday. You can still watch them on Friday, because I really want to be able to get out for the people who don't use Facebook. I want to be able to get this newsletter out on Friday in a timely way, and that's easier if I do the videos on Thursday. I'm also warned by other people around here that as things get really busy, I need to set things up so that I can move things out the door faster. So some of my write-ups may get more bullet pointy, but right now I still have time to write them up. And finally, I just want to wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day. I got my beads for the day. My mom's maiden name was Hogan, and her whole family is 100% Irish Catholic. So I have a lot of Irish in me, and we'll be thinking about that today. And in fact, apparently there's an event this morning that serves Irish coffee. I'm not sure I can get through the day starting it with Irish coffee, but we'll see. And actually, the next thing I'm going to go to is a forum on vaccines. So I'm off to do that. Have a great weekend. Happy St. Patrick's Day to those of you who are celebrating it, and we'll see you next week.